what happens if Castellanos gets injured? What do we do? Well, I would guess Brock Glenn becomes your starting quarterback. Not all of the quarterbacks in Gus Malzahn's offense have been as fleet of foot and shifty as Castellanos. He's had guys that are able to run that offense, maybe less effective in the run game aspect of it than Castellanos in the past. But, Brock Glenn's not immobile. In fact, he's fairly athletic.
And
he's also tough.
Clearly invested in sticking around because there was a lot of talk that maybe both quarterbacks would go, both Luke and Brock would leave in the portal. Brock said, no, I'm sticking around. So if he's invested in sticking around and he heard he heard something he liked from Gus Malzahn to not explore options, then it's an interesting subplot because I understand, Trevor Jackson was a 4-star and he was committed to Ole Miss, and I don't know what the scholarship situation is. I'm sure he'll get one if it expands to 105 if he doesn't already have a full scholarship. Kevin Sperry, I like
Kevin Sperry too. True freshman. I don't know that you would want to roll him out there, but I'm with you.
Probably not. Not ideal to roll out a true freshman when you have a couple of players who are more veteran in front of him on the 2D, but it's going to be there's so many things that are fascinating about spring camp that are obvious and that are going to need to be covered and examined. That's one of those tier 2 or tier 3 storylines that's not nothing. Quite significant. What is the backup plan? Who is going to win those reps?
When you run the quarterback as frequently as he does, and when you bring in a Castellanos who is very effective at running the football, you have to plan for injury. You have to plan for the fact that he may miss a series, a quarter, a half, a game. He's going to get hit a lot, and he's tiny. He's already been banged up. So this is probably going to happen. It is probably going to happen. And I would think that, yes, you would have a plan for it. Trevor Jackson, you brought him up a moment ago. It's a good person to bring up. Trevor Jackson, not a big guy, but he is, nearly 200 pounds now, and he's 6'3", I think Trevor is, somewhere in there.
Yeah, he's taller.
He's taller. Yeah, I've stood now. He's taller than me. He's certainly taller than Castellanos. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, a lot of people are.
Yeah, but what would you say Trevor is? Just over
6'3" listed.
Okay, yeah, I knew he was pretty tall. I've stood next to him a couple times. Anyhow, he's he's very athletic, very shifty. So I don't know who would win the job, but obviously the answer is it's either Brock or Trevor as the backup running the system, and I'm fine with either.
Well, frankly. And the answer is there needs to be some urgency to cultivate that answer for the reasons you're outlining, which is if you start with Alabama, that's going to be a physical game. You would need to have a contingency plan before that game begins. Any game, really, you need to have a plan, a backup plan. But when you play somebody as physical as that out the gate, look, every drive matters. Every play is critical. So those reps are going to be fascinating. And this goes back to, again, I hope practice is run in such a way that the second team and the third team maybe get a little bit more than they have in the past couple of seasons because you're going to need them. You're going to need him desperately. And the hard part is with Castellanos coming in with so many other new players, he needs reps. So you're going to need to have concurrent reps going on. I really believe that. I hope they do.
I hope they do too. That is a question that is going to be on the mind of many. What changes? I've already heard it asked several times. We don't know the answer, but what changes, if any, are going to be made to the way they practice? And that's a part of it. And there's a lot of reasons that I want some things to change. I'm going to say this because I think I have to. I would have liked and voiced it. I just didn't dwell on it. There was no reason to dwell on it. And I got a lot of things wrong, so I'm not trying to say I'm always right. That's certainly not true. But I didn't love their practices when they were winning either. And I thought they were a little softy. And, I've told you that before, and we've talked about that before. So, there was no reason for me to dwell on it because they freaking won. So why would I be stupid on my part? Like, hey, guys, these guys really aren't practicing very hard at all. This is, meanwhile, they're winning every game they play. So
right.
That would be dumb. But when you have something like this play out the manner that it did, and you have to assess the entirety of what you're doing, it's a good time to bring it up. Like, why don't we add some toughness to this thing?
It's just, again, you're right. The education, the toughness, but the education part of it, they're both so critical.
Yes.
And on both sides of the ball, new schemes. I get that Gus's scheme resembles Mike's in some
there are
ways.
all kinds of elements of it, yes.
But if you've got in the starting group 4 new offensive linemen starting, 2 new wide receivers, 2 new tight ends, maybe a running back, probably not, doesn't look like now unless you somehow a playoff team loses one, a new quarterback. They need every rep that they can get. But so too do the understudies who are breaking in a new scheme. They need every rep that they can get. Same thing for the other side of the football.
Yeah.
If you're running 3-3-5, man, there is no we know what we have in Darrell Jackson. Hell no, we don't know what we have because we're asking him to do different things.
Yeah, we think he's a nice fit, but we don't know how he's going to perform given the responsibilities
of the position and the scheme that we're drawing up and what we need him to learn. So, man, the education part of this, I agree with you. The toughness is goes without saying. But they need to maximize every minute they possibly can. I'm hoping there's not a whole lot of standing around.
I don't think there will be, but I don't know that, and I can't imagine that. Look, I come at it from the standpoint of the other side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball. You got to run this at full speed. You got to see what you have. Can you implement and run the system you want, the 3-3-5? Can you do that? Do you have the horses to do that, or do we need to modify this greatly in year one? Because you got to know that answer right away, and I think one of the ways you find that out is full speed, head on, let's go. Play it. Play fast. What do you know? What can you do? And this is I don't know how they'll answer that question or what they'll do with that, but I would think on the defensive side, they're going to want to be more physical.
So I know you've got answers on this because you've heard, you've seen press conferences from other coaches talk about physical days and so forth. I've got a quick answer as well from Hog Watcher. Question: have either you went to and watched any other Division I practices the last few years? Are we comparing practices to other teams or our former experiences of what football used to be like? For me personally, I can only speak on the practices that I've seen, which are Florida State practices from 3 different head coaches.
3 different head coaches, right.
And Jimbo's is light years more active than the 2 successors. I don't know if you want to use the term success anywhere near that, but with Willie Taggart, Mike had success with something that I think more closely resembles Willie Taggart's style of practice than Jimbo's style of practice, which of course is the Saban method of practicing. There was just more activity. Now, toughness I can't speak to, but more activity.
Okay, well, I can tell you from 3 different standpoints. I can tell you from the way football used to be when I played back in the day, and a lot of people can probably do that, right? So that's not like a, hey, look at me, but I can. And then I can tell you I was at Bowden's practices when I first broke into the business. We had opportunities. It was fun to do, and I can tell you that it was much more physical back then. Mickey Andrews' practices, yes, very, very physical. Now, I would also tell you that the belief as to what kind of practice you should have has changed in football at the high school level, the college level, and the professional level. Some of that has been because of a strong players union in the case of the NFL, where they say we don't need to hit as much. We know how to tackle. We wouldn't have gotten here if we didn't. You don't have to beat us to death. And in fact, we're going to protect ourselves. This is a job, and I'd like to keep it, and I don't need to get hurt because you're going to cut me. That's what you're going to do. So they've been able to regulate some of it out of the game. But so there's been a shift in the belief of what a practice should look like going from, a few decades back to where we are now. But also there is a disagreement on this issue, even amongst modern college coaches. Georgia Tech, Georgia, other coaches have alluded to certain days of the week in which they have practices in which the physicality of those said practices are much more intense than any other day of the week when they're practicing, right? So at Georgia, it's on a Tuesday because I heard them talk about this. I've obviously not been to Athens to see those practices, so I'm not going to claim that I was there. But Kirby has brought that up. In fact, he's got a name for him. And Georgia Tech's coach said it as well. And we talked about it. He's a former offensive lineman. It kind of stands to reason to me that they would be, right? I don't know how the rest of the country practices. It may be that Florida State, in theory, practices with more physical play than some other schools in other states and other leagues that I never see. I kind of doubt it, but maybe. So it's a mix and match, that answer. It's a little bit of old school from way back when, and I remember watching Florida State's practices when I first started, late 90s. 98, 99, 2000, going to those were very physical practices. I mean, but a lot has changed since then. Mat drills don't exist anymore either.
There was a brief period in time under Norvell where they did have 2 fields going at once. It might have been a day or 2, but I remember seeing it when they were outside. I don't know if you were there for those particular days, but they had the 3 fields. This is before construction began on the football-only facility, or the 2 fields, I should say. And you saw on both fields, offense versus defense, concurrent reps going. And that I was thinking to myself, oh, is this because we've built up depth now that we've gotten to a place where you can conduct a practice as such? But it hadn't stayed that way.
No.
I hope it does. Just you've got so many new concepts you've got to teach, and you didn't have the bowl practices to work in any of them. So you got to move.
I loved the way Coach Fisher practiced. I think you did too.
Yeah. Well, especially when you see other methods, you go, whoa.
That was, Coach Fisher, that was the practice.
1s and 3s, 2s and 4s.
Let's go. And it was now. And it was constant.
Yeah.
We ain't screwing around.
It's almost like Saban knew what he was doing.
Correct.